Good morning, everyone. Whoever's there. This week I've been looking at friendship, and I've had 4 sessions this week on friendship, and yeah, it can get to be a bit of a task to keep coming up with themes or keep coming up with topics, And I did spend like 9 days on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and in a way that kind of gave me a bit of space, just to morning, Joe, did a bit of space to just relax into, kind of exploring something over a number of days. So so I think I'm going to do that. The next 3 days, I'm going to look into and kind of ramble around, as Subhuti would say. I'm going to have a ramble around the topic of love and unconditional love, and so for 3 days. So that'll make a week of talks on friendship, and then after that, I think it'd be good to move on to looking at ritual and devotion for a week. So a little bit. Sometimes actually, it's I've talked about the idea of flow. Where your happiness often comes about because you've got certain skills that you're using, so you kind of feel good about yourself, like you're being well used. So people who are really good with people, when they're in and amongst people, helping people, they feel really good about themselves. But it's also helpful if we're going to have what's called flow, is that we have challenges as well. That our skills we may be like a little bit on the edge of our skills, and I'm slightly chaotic this morning with my preparation for this, and having just looked, I had a really long bath, but then just looked at this not that long ago. Sometimes it helps to have a bit of an edge, and so what I'm going to do to start off with is we're not going to do any body work to start with. We'll do a little bit of something subtle later on and do meditation later on, but I'm going to talk first because I think it just sets the scene really for what we're going to do in the meditation. That's a bit more on the theme of unconditional love. So I've got this book called Defining. So things are back to front. I know they'll get reversed when it's when it's these are on YouTube. These videos are on YouTube. I've just got a problem with if I reverse it now, it squashes the video up. So Thomas J. Ord, and he's a scholar, and he talks about. He goes into. Basically, there are 3 different forms of love in the Greek: agape, eros, and philia. So there's debate about what these are, and obviously you get among people with different views, different religious views. It will vary what they think. But basically, so agape is, what does it say here? It says, theologians, philosophers and scientists who speak of agape typically believe it means something beyond or distinct from the simple word love. Many adopt agape to distinguish their notion of love from romantic or popular understandings. Some adopt agape because it entails special reference to divine action. Others identify it with altruism. Still others, including me, use agape to distinguish some actions from others that might also promote well-being. So basically, theologians tend to talk about it as unconditional, spontaneous, groundless or unmotivated, meaning sort of not coming from elsewhere in a way. In opposition to all that can be so-called self-love, sacrificial, giving to others. So that in theistic religions, you have to have this sense of sacrifice. And then it's often linked with God or high power, that sort of thing. But in Buddhism, it would be linked with the Bodhisattva, who is the altruistic, the archetypal figure in Buddhism that is associated with compassion. Yeah, okay, that's agape, and then you've got eros. So we all know about eros. So eros is, the little kind of winged cherub who shoots the arrow into your heart, and then you fall in love. That's the normal kind of way people see eros. So just say, I've used Sagramati. So Sagramati's got a book called Nietzsche and Buddhism, Robert Morrison. So he's talking about Socrates and Plato's Symposium. He says, in the Symposium, Socrates makes the interesting point that as eros desires beauty, so it's like, yeah, we fall in love with somebody or something, as eros desires beauty, and that one desires that which one lacks. Eros therefore lacks and does not possess beauty. Hence eros represents a state of desiring that which one lacks. So when Socrates asked for examples of some other kinds of eros, other than a kind of, I suppose, a kind of possessiveness or something, love of a person, Diotima gives the examples of love of money or of physical prowess or of wisdom and poetry, which are all eros under different names, in the sense that they all share the characteristics of eros. Eros can therefore be understood as a generic concept which embraces every desire for good and for happiness. It's not therefore to be identified with only one particular drive or effect, emotion, but is a characteristic shared by many drives, including the more spiritual. Diotima also makes a distinction in alluding to the nature of eros, and that in that procreation can be either physical or spiritual. The former brings forth children, while the latter creates beauty of mind and character, even wisdom. Wisdom being one of the most beautiful things. So, eros can be attraction to an attractive body, and it can be attraction to a beautiful state of mind. Okay, that's eros. And then the third type is of love is philia. So philia has been identified with friendship. Aristotle says, friendship is very necessary for living, and no one would choose to live without friends. And Aristotle even suggests that non-human animals express philia. The philosophers and theologians after Aristotle often speak of special relationships as a way of accounting for philia. These special relationships are ones in which those involved are attached in some way and cooperate. By speaking of special relationships, scholars analyse a wide array of personal bonds between those different in age, gender, intellect, socio-economic status, and even species. In philia, persons give themselves over to the relationship and thereby create a good that they could not separately achieve. So yeah, this isn't a kind of exhaustive scholarly study of the three types of love, but I think it just gives us a sense of that there are these like different types of love, of emotion. Where do we go next? All right. Last night I ended up watching some of this. An Idiot Abroad, Carl Pilkington, and I just happened to have a sale on at the charity shop where they're giving 10 DVDs for £1, and so I got 50 DVDs. So I thought this was really good. I thought that it's kind of a bit weird. It's a bit weird. I remember seeing Carl Pilkington together with who did Ripping Yarns, the Monty Python guy. I can't remember his name. Anyway, sorry. And it was just really weird, the juxtaposition of the two of them. Yeah, so he's kind of going around China and he's going around India, and there was at one point he's there by the Ganges, and there's this Hindu sadhu, holy man, who's been holding his arm up in the air for for years, like 10 years or something, and it's like it's all just withered, and the nails are, Michael Palin, thank you. The nails are all just really long. It's just, and this is a form of Hindu asceticism, and the idea is that you kind of purifying yourself through self-torture. So it's like letting go of the body and concern with the body, yeah, so I think what can happen often is, like, we have this idea of spirituality, which, and I think this is very much picked up on in like the New Age philosophy and things, that spirituality is something that's kind of, it's like it's somewhere else from us, from that we access through maybe going to an ashram or kind of sitting at the feet of a guru, and the guru's like exuding some calm and things, and you kind of feel like you're kind of picking up on that, but I think it can be a little bit kind of it can become a bit self-orientated. It's a bit like my spirituality, so we want to feel spiritual, so in I'll just say a little bit about Hinduism. So in Hinduism, in Buddhism, you've got the teaching of the three lakshanas, that everything, all phenomena are impermanent. They lack anicca, they lack selfhood and atman, and they are ultimately unsatisfactory. You know, they don't, to the extent that they decay, they won't satisfy us. And so this is from Andrew Skilton's book, Concise History of Buddhism, page 31. And he says that this Buddhist teaching is a refutation of the Upanishadic teaching that reality is Sat Chitta Ananda. So Sat Chitta Ananda. Sat means existence. So in Hinduism, the belief is that there's this the universe has this pure being that's there beyond our phenomenal existence, that's kind of there in the background, that you try and access through meditation or whatever, and it's unchanging and permanent. You know, so Buddhism say no, things are impermanent, but Hinduism says no, things are permanent. It's kind of conscious chitta. In a way, it has a sort of there's a sort of self there. So you get the idea of Atman, and Brahman. So Atman is the fixed self that Hindus believe that it exists beyond your permanent existence, beyond your phenomenal existence. Sorry. So you try and believe, Hindus believe that just as the you know, if you have some salt in some water, that everywhere you taste the water there'll be salt. So in the same way, there's this Atman behind everything. That's the theory. That's permanent. Or in terms of the universe, there's Brahman. There's like God is there behind everything in the on a universal level. You know, that's the belief, and that somehow if you can have union between Atman and Brahman, then that is your liberation. That's your nirvana, whatever. That's your moksha. And then things are blissful. So, you know, your Hindu sage doing his asceticism will be kind of like trying to contact bliss in his experience. And, you know, New Age people are often kind of, that's the focus, isn't it? It's often on bliss, you know, my bliss and everything. But, you know, like, so, but the Buddhism says, well, actually, you know, no, life has suffering in it. You know, it's not just all about bliss. So in terms of the reason I'm mentioning this is that I think it's quite influential on our idea of love, that it's spiritual and it's kind of other. You know, it comes from elsewhere, and that it's somehow it's nothing to do with just ordinary life. But that isn't the Buddhist view. The Buddhist view is that it is to do with ordinary life. Sorry, somebody's ringing me from India. Yeah. So in Buddhism we have, in a way, the equivalent figure to Eros is a 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. So a 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara is the Bodhisattva of compassion, and he has 11 heads looking in all directions. Which book, Liz? Oh, it's Concise History of Buddhism, page 31. So he has 11 heads looking in all directions and 1,000 arms, and in each of his hands is an implement. And in one hand there's a bow and arrow. So this is something called the rite of fascination. So it's a bit like, whereas like Eros fires his arrow into your heart and you become fascinated with the object of your love. When Avalokiteshvara fires the arrow into your heart, you become fascinated with the Dharma, with Buddhism, with what you might be able to do if you practice Buddhism, and what happiness you might be able to bring about in the world if you practice Buddhism. So it's like so attraction is kind of really important. To use our, if we want to help people, we need to kind of attract them. So he's like looking out into the universe, and is kind of being aware of all the beings in the universe, and in a way it just makes logical sense that what a person with a lot of compassion would be doing would be being interested in living beings, but they would see them as living beings. They would see them not as objects, but as centers of experience that don't want to suffer and want to be happy. So if we can imagine that Avalokiteshvara or any Buddha, so Avalokiteshvara just represents the compassionate aspect of the Buddha. Any enlightened being would just be kind of really, when they look out on the universe, they don't see physical, material things as the main thing. What they see is all beings as the main thing. They see beings in states of suffering and confusion and all that sort of thing. And then they're aware of them. So it's like he's looking out in all directions and he's aware of them all. And he's aware, in a way, it just makes sense that, I've talked in previous sessions about mindfulness being knowing what state you're in and what state you need to get into, knowing when you're suffering or when something is conducing to suffering, and knowing how to get to happiness, to convert that to happiness. So Avalokiteshvara will be looking at, he'll be seeing the state that all beings are in, and then he'll be seeing the state that they need to get into or want to get into, which is like nirvana, which is where they're in charge, they're solving all their problems, and then he would know how to get them from the first to the second. He'd know how to get them from the state that they're in and the state that they're getting into. So all they want to get into. So all of the implements represent the thing that they need to do to get to where they need to get to. So he'll be giving some food, he'll be giving some the Dharma, he'll be giving whatever they need. I'm just going to plug my iPad in because it's going to run out of battery any minute. Sorry about that. Hope that works. So implicit in the Buddhist view, is that because everything is impermanent, so there isn't the Buddha didn't see, when he looked into his experience, he didn't see anything permanent, so things are just endlessly changing and coming into being independence on conditions and passing out of being independence on conditions. So we just have to make the best out of that. This is all we have. This is it. What we've presented with is it. There's nothing beyond, in another dimension, that's going to be our source of salvation. So we have to actually work with that situation. And so one of the things that we need to do is to bring kind of love to ourselves and to others. To care for ourselves in this situation that's the one that we're landed with. So so when we kind of try to develop loving kindness towards ourselves in the Metta Bhavana meditation. So I've just mentioned that so Metta Bhavana metta means universal love, loving kindness, and Bhavana means cultivation. So the cultivation of universal loving kindness. So when we're doing that practice, then this is something I did 30 years ago, actually. Okay, it's back to front, I know. But so when we're trying to cultivate loving kindness or metta, Sangharakshita says something like, love is awareness of the being of a person or yourself. So it's awareness of your being, right? So when you're trying to, so hey, there's you being aware of yourself, and then there's you being aware of whoever the person is that you bring into mind in the meditation. Now, what can happen is that you can have metta flowing in a good way, or you can have ways in which it's not quite the same, it's not quite it, or something. So you could see that when you're, it's like we have to be aware of ourself as a kind of real person, a real centre of experience here when we're doing the Metta Bhavana, and we have to be aware of the other person as real, and then it's a real connection between two real things. Now, what can happen when we get into things that are other than metta is like either we lose the sense of ourself, or we lose the sense of the other, or the other might even be ourself if that's what we're focusing on in that stage of the Metta Bhavana. So when we, so we can get into a state of sentimental attachment or something like that. So for instance, like when I think this happened quite a bit when Live Aid happened in the 1980s, so it was like there's this kind of response to the famine in Africa. And I think what can happen is you actually become the other person on the other end, the person in Africa can start to be a bit less of a real person and more of an idea, And what happens is you become more focused on yourself than you are on them. So your act of compassion becomes you feeling good about yourself that you're doing something, that you're giving £20 or something to the famine in Africa, and you become like, oh, I feel great, I've done this for the other person, So in a way that isn't metta. That's something that's a bit like metta, but it's not quite it. So it's a bit like you're appropriating something to yourself. It's serving you, rather than the other person, what can also happen is where you, for instance, you kind of lose a bit touch with yourself, and maybe you go too far in the other direction towards the other person. So when somebody's suffering a lot, and we're kind of not that we're not all that grounded in ourselves, or we're not that stable or something, and we become too aware of the other person and their suffering. It's like we see all the suffering in the world, and it overwhelms us. It's like we develop something called horrified anxiety. It's like it's a near enemy of compassion. It's like, oh, it's all too much. So again, that's not like meta's not there then, because in a way we've lost our stability, we've lost our connection with ourselves and our heart, and we're not, we're not grounded enough, So to have loving kindness really working, it's like we have to both be in contact with the person that we're meditating on, and be in contact with ourselves, and have the both in balance in a way, so that there's something happening. There's a conduit happening, between us being real and that person out there being real, and then I think what happens is we actually it becomes an action. It becomes, rather than an idea. It's a real action between two real things. Us and our sense of agency, and the other. So we actually do something. We actually do something. We actually feel something. We actually want something. We actually want that other person to do well. And then out of that, when we come out of our meditation at the end, at the end of our meditation, we then actually start going about helping people, because we've wanted to do that. We've developed the desire to do that in the meditation. So so I think the one common thing that can come up with the metta bhavana is that we have this sense of should. Oh yeah, I'm a nice liberal Buddhist. I've been practicing many years, and therefore when I sit down on the meditation cushion, it should happen that I immediately feel loving kindness for all the people in the meditation. And then what then happens is that, because that doesn't happen, then we start to try and exert our will to make it happen. And it's like people sort of squeezing this tube of toothpaste. They're trying to squeeze something out of the meditation artificially, in a way. So that's it's just an exercise in ego, in a way. That we think, well, something, I need to be doing something, otherwise I'll not look good, therefore I need to squeeze this out artificially, and but the point is that we need to be actually we need to be doing loving kindness in a way that works, where we are actually, because the world needs loving kindness. It doesn't need our agonizing and straining and not doing it, but going through the motions of doing it and all that. It actually needs our kindness and our actions. So I think the whole kind of dropping the idea of should, and just trying to go to, well, what really, what is loving kindness? How do you bring it about? So I'm just going to go through into the kitchen and go back to my diagram that I used earlier. So on, oops. Hang on a minute. I went back to the front there. So, sorry, we lost the signal there for a minute. So, yeah, so going back to the other week, so what I was talking about was mind. So mind being three things: our thoughts, our emotions, and our attention. And so our emotion, mind, in the sense of it, our emotion, often got conditioned by feeling. So, feeling is pleasure and pain. So, but feeling, mind is also conditioned by views. So the way that the Metta works is that we work on our views to change our emotions. So if our emotion is towards ourselves at the moment is indifference, then it's probably likely that our view about ourselves is that we're not a sensitive human being with dreams and everything. That we're just a bit of an object. We're just an object. Or even if we've got criticism towards ourselves, we're an object in our own way. But we're not. The true view about ourselves is that we are a human being, and that we do desire happiness and do want to overcome suffering. So if we change the view about ourselves, we change the emotion towards ourselves. So we change the view to seeing ourselves as a human being. We change the emotion to wanting ourselves to do well, to caring about ourselves. So this is nothing to do with straining to force out some emotion. It's about working with conditions, the conditions that we're in. So he's working with here the condition of our views about ourselves or other beings, and we change the view, we change the emotion, we change the mind state. So I just wanted to mention that here. So it's like Avalokiteshvara's emotion comes from the fact that his view about living beings is completely in line with what they are. So he then naturally wants to look after them, and he's got a jewel which is held close to his heart, and in a way what that's saying is that the thing most precious to him is the well-being of all living beings, the precious thing being the jewel. Okay, so I'm just going to head back into the lounge. So what we'll do is we'll do some little bit of movement, just to okay. Sorry, got lost again there. Yeah, so we'll do a little bit of gentle body work before we meditate. So just put your arms out to the side, and just with your middle finger, just doing little circles. And then with your next finger, ring finger, pointing outwards, just doing circles with that. And then with your little finger, okay, and then just with your these fingers, just pointing upwards, just little circles, and just being sensitive to the effect of whatever it is, however big a circle you do or how fast you do it. Just change that so that it gives you what you're looking for in terms of energy in your back. Keep losing signal there, it's the wireless. Okay, so we're going to do some Metta Bhavana, but bearing in mind some of the what I've been saying around ourselves, the other person, staying in touch with both. So just closing your eyes. And connecting with yourself. And trying to have a sense of as much of yourself being here as possible. And then we'll do the Karuna Bhavana meditation. So this is the Metta Bhavana, but focusing on compassion, on suffering. So now what I want you to do is just bring to mind somebody who's suffering. So maybe imagine somebody who's in hospital at the moment, not on a ventilator. And then coming back to ourselves, so having a sense of ourselves sitting here. And a sense of strong kind of presence and stability and presence. And then being aware of the other person who's suffering. And trying to not go into horrified anxiety around them. So that's when we lose the stable connection with ourselves. We start worrying. So we need to work on our end of things. You know, stay calm, stay grounded, stay positive. but then not losing the other person, not letting them kind of become abstract or fade into, seeing them as a real person with real feelings and real suffering happening. Maybe trying to imagine what the experience is like at the moment a bit, but without getting into horrified anxiety. May they be well. And just having a sense in the meditation of, whether you're developing something like a real desire to help, because that should be the outcome of the meditation. Obviously, that desire to help needs to be have some wisdom in it, so it's like not just rushing in and into danger, but you would like to help. That's the outcome that would come out of the Karana Bhavana compassion meditation. So coming back again to ourselves, stability, presence. Not forgetting the other person, letting them be there as well in their fullness of experience. Trying to see things from their point of view at the moment. So now in the second stage of the Karana Bhavana, we focus on ourselves. So again, just tuning into ourselves sitting here as the meditator. Are we stable? Are we present? Are we kind of as fully alive as we can be? And then bringing to mind ourselves as the object of our meditation, and particularly ourselves to the extent that we suffer. So maybe bringing to mind a time when we have suffered recently, in the last week. So yeah, keeping those two things going, ourself as the meditator and ourself as the object. As both real. And what we're looking for as the outcome is a real sense that we want to help ourselves in our suffering. So if our sense of ourselves as the objects of the meditation, starts to become a little bit abstract or something, maybe we start to get into sentimentality. So if that's the case, can we increase the sense of ourselves as the objects, as the real thing, real person, not just an idea? May I be well. And then if we start to become a bit overwhelmed by our own suffering, then maybe we've lost the connection with ourselves as the meditator. Can we bring in more stability, more presence into our meditation? Work on our anxiety. Work on our concentration. Our connection with our body. So now in the last stage, just bringing to mind other people, the other people who are meditating here in this group. And connecting with ourselves as the meditator, having a sense of stability and equanimity and calm, positivity. And connecting with the others as the objects of meditation, and seeing everybody in the group to the extent that they've suffered in the last week. So wishing them well, but trying to make that well-wishing real, so it's not sentimental. It's not like there's this idea of this person that then feeds an idea of us feeling good about ourselves. That's not the point. The point is that we actually come out of the meditation with a real desire to help, to the extent that there is a need for help because of suffering. So yeah, making the objects of our meditation, the other people, kind of as real as possible, being in touch with their actual experience, their actual suffering. But not allowing it to overwhelm us. And maybe thinking about just making ourselves more robust over time so that we can handle difficulties, difficult emotions, not be overwhelmed. And then just extending your meditation into the world, bringing to mind other people beyond this group. And again, just trying to have a sense of the reality for those people in terms of their suffering. And it's not a case of being sentimental about it. It's to feel good about ourselves. It's about connecting with the real situation, the real people, and then opening our heart up to that situation for them, really wanting them to be well and not suffer, and not allowing ourselves to become overwhelmed. Staying stable and present, positive. And then in your own time, bring this meditation to a close. Okay, well, I hope that made some sort of sense. It was maybe a little bit chaotic at times, but yeah, I'm glad I got to cover some key areas like sentimentality and the idea of spirituality and that, but the view of what love is in Buddhism, really, but also the covering the agape, eros, and philia, the different types of love that are there in that the Greeks identified. So maybe that's some food for reflection today on all this, and we've got another go tomorrow. So. Yeah, I'm really glad I thought, let's give it a bit of time this. So yeah. And if you've got any questions, put them in the comments, and I'll try and answer them tomorrow. If you want something to be covered, I could try and cover it tomorrow. Okay, so have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow. All right then. Bye bye.